Good morning. Good morning. Dear delegates, guests, participants, CBC, Radio-Canada, ladies and gentlemen, by inviting the Société d'Histoire de Toronto to meet you today and to speak to Canada at its 150th, you've decided to include in your forum a group which is part of the Francophone community, often invisible in Toronto. The Société d'Histoire de Toronto is also part of the community of organizations defending Toronto's heritage. So your invitation represents for us a great honor. We wish to celebrate Canada at 150 so that 2017 will be a great year. Of course, if Canada didn't exist, we would have to invent it. But what is it that we want to celebrate exactly? Do we want to celebrate Canada in its present political form? Maybe. But that configuration has only existed since Newfoundland entered Confederation in 1949. So next year, in 2014, that Canada will have a certain age of maturity because all geographical partners will be included then. Events, strong historic symbols occurring in Canada and that we could celebrate and commemorate are numerous. For example, in 2012, we could have celebrated the 175th anniversary of the rebellions of 1837-38 and the will of recognition and emancipation of Canadians in Upper Canada and Lower Canada vis-à-vis colonial rule. This year we could celebrate the 165 years of the beginning of responsible government in 1848 and the election of Hippolyte Lafontaine as Prime Minister of the United Province of Canada, when Lafontaine led the government of the United Province of Canada. In fact, he became the first democratically elected head of government in the colonial world. And this is true for all empires at the time. 100 years before the great movements for decolonization in the 1960s, Canada showed the way in a peaceful manner. This is a remarkable event in the history of the world. But let's look at 1867. That is the date that marks the will of creating a country from coast to coast, a sovereign country, a bicultural country. And some gifts have a moral value. It's the intent that counts. And there have been good intentions to create what is beautiful, good, real, solid, and that's fundamentally Canadian.
Fun and a little bit of malice to our propensity to celebrate, or rather to reaffirm the certainty of Canada. What I wanted to underline is that Canada did not wait until 1867 to affirm characteristics that could serve as model for other countries and for enlightened reasons. Before 1867, Canada already had une continuité historique, a continuum, somewhat scattered, but nonetheless strong and valuable. And that should not be overlooked. And at the Société d'Histoire de Toronto, this is what we like to do. We like to replace historically significant events and facts in their continuum, in their continuité historique. We are a small organization, but we have projects, and it seems we have enough of them and interesting enough to be invited to a large audience to talk about the future of Canada. Our mandate is to promote the French history of Toronto and to promote Toronto history in French. It's also to help other heritage organizations to protect heritage sites in the city. As you can appreciate, it is a wide-ranging mandate, and we have a lot of fun. So how does la Société d'Histoire de Toronto would like to celebrate Canada at 150? Well, pretty much like we promoted the beginnings of Toronto. Il y a quelques années,
Some years ago, our Société suggested to other heritage groups and the city of Toronto to create an historic park on the Humber River from Baby Point to Lake Ontario. Why? Because on the shores of the Humber River that Toronto was born. The various founding peoples of the country and Toronto found themselves there. The Huron-Wendat, the Senecas, the Ojibways, the French, and the English. Because in the 17th and 18th centuries, the Humber River was a meeting place between French explorers and the First Nations. The name Toronto existed long before the arrival of the first Europeans. The historic park has its rightful place in Toronto before Lord Simcoe arrived. But the historic park does not speak only the French. It's also the arrival of the Loyalists, the industrialization of Toronto, the British in the development of business, the transformation of the city, and the role of Toronto in our history, and the role of the Humber River. The historic park speaks of the continuity of Toronto. This project was approved with much enthusiasm. It's a great success. Every day, many people from Toronto discover the origins and the development of their city while walking in the park. If you haven't done so yet, follow the example of the families who in the summers on Sundays visit. Discover it for yourselves.
2017. Well, we will start by going back 400 years ago in 1615. I think that here I have a slide. And I would like to show you the 1650. The next one, please. And that's Ontario in 1615. Well, this is quite a map in the history of Canada. At the time, Ontario and Toronto is the end of the world. What do we want to do with the end of the world? Well, 400 years ago, Champlain came to Ontario, and with him, a modest but unstoppable seed of globalization. Since then, Ontario has been present on the world stage, if not in the world markets, so to speak, with some modest beginnings, but it hasn't ended there. In late August, early September 1615, Samuel de Champlain and Étienne Brûlé met in Cayagé, today Orillia. They were preparing an expedition with their allies and the Huron-Wendat against Huron's rivals. In 2015, from September 4th to September 7th, la Société d'Histoire de Toronto will reenact the Étienne Brûlé expedition and his 12 Huron-Wendat companions from Orillia to the historical park in Toronto. Nous ferons 40 km en canoë.
There'll be 40 kilometers in canoes and 80 kilometers walking, and with 50 kilometers from Honolulu to Kleinburg on Sunday, September 6th. What will remain from this adventure?
From this adventure, we'd like to see a multi-use hiking path from Orillia to Toronto that would showcase the historical landmarks of Ontario. We have Champlain statue in Orillia. We have in Barrie the black settlement that was established by the government decree in 1819. There is the Fort Willow in Barrie. We have the Nokida Trail in Holland Landing, the new market Ghost Canal, Sharon Temple and Children of the Peace. We have heritage plaque along the road. We can put a little culture with Mike Michael in Kleinburg, and we have the historical park. We won't be ready for 2015, but for 2017, we would like to see that as a testimony to our country. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Miigwech. This is a living example. We have to know where we come from, to know where we're going. Thank you very much. Thank you.